The Crimson Fleet's last hope. The morning sun cast long shadows across the agricultural domes of Epsilon 7, humanity's newest frontier colony. Dr. Elena Rodriguez stood in her laboratory, examining soil samples from the planet's northern continent. The peaceful routine of colonial life was something she had grown to love after years of chaotic research on Earth. The gentle hum of atmospheric processors and the distant laughter of children playing in the recreation centers created a symphony of hope and progress. Captain Marcus Chen was reviewing security reports in the colony's command center when the sensors began screaming. The displays lit up with warnings as massive objects appeared at the edge of the system. Ships unlike anything in the human fleet emerged from hyperspace, their hulls gleaming like spilled blood against the void. These were vessels that had burned entire worlds, crushed civilizations, and left nothing but cosmic dust in their wake. "Dear God," whispered Communications Officer Sarah Kim, her face pale as she recognized the distinctive crimson markings. "It's the Zephyrian Crimson Fleet." The name struck fear into every human heart. The Zephyrians were legend across the galaxy, a species of warriors so fierce that even mentioning their name in some sectors was considered bad luck. They stood nearly 3 meters tall, with chitinous exoskeletons that could deflect energy weapons and claws capable of tearing through steel. Their empire stretched across dozens of star systems, each one conquered through overwhelming force and strategic brilliance. Marcus felt his hands tremble as he activated the colony's defense systems. The automated turrets and energy shields were pathetic compared to what was approaching. Epsilon 7 had been built as a peaceful research colony, not a fortress. Against the Crimson Fleet, they were defenseless. The lead ship, massive beyond comprehension, slowly approached the colony. Its communication array activated, sending a signal that made every speaker in the facility crackle with static. Then came a voice, deep and resonant, speaking in perfect human standard. "Humans of Epsilon 7. I am General Vexthera of the Crimson Fleet. We request permission to land. We come not as conquerors, but as supplicants." The word supplicants hung in the air like an impossible dream. Zephyrians didn't ask for anything. They took what they wanted and destroyed what they didn't need. Marcus exchanged glances with his staff, seeing the same confusion reflected in their eyes. "This has to be a trap," muttered Security Chief David Park. "They're planning something." But Elena had arrived in the command center, drawn by the commotion. As a xenobiologist, she had studied every known species in the galaxy, including the Zephyrians. Something in the general's tone struck her as genuine, though she couldn't explain why. "Open a channel," she said quietly. Marcus stared at her. "Elena, you can't be serious." "Open the channel, Marcus. If they wanted to destroy us, we'd already be dead." The truth of her words was undeniable. The Crimson Fleet could have obliterated the colony without warning. Instead, they were asking permission to land. Marcus reluctantly activated the communication system. "General Vexthera, this is Dr. Elena Rodriguez, leader of the Epsilon 7 research colony. State your intentions." The response came immediately. "Dr. Rodriguez, we require your assistance with a matter of utmost importance to our species. May we land and speak face to face. I give you my word as a warrior that no harm will come to your people during our meeting." The word of a Zephyrian warrior was considered sacred across the galaxy. They were many things: brutal, efficient, terrifying. But they were never oath-breakers. Elena made a decision that would change the course of galactic history. "Permission granted, General. Bay 7 is prepared for your arrival." 2 hours later, Elena stood in the landing bay as the Zephyrian shuttle touched down. The massive doors opened with a hiss of pressurized air, and General Vexthera emerged. She was even more imposing in person, her crimson exoskeleton adorned with battle scars and military honors. Behind her came 3 other Zephyrians, each carrying what appeared to be sealed containers. The general approached Elena with measured steps, stopping at a respectful distance. When she spoke, Her voice carried an emotion that Elena had never heard associated with Zephyrians: desperation. "Dr. Rodriguez, what I am about to tell you must not leave this room. Our species faces extinction, and you humans represent our only hope for survival." Elena felt her scientific curiosity override her fear. "Extinction? Your empire spans half the galaxy. How is that possible?" Vexthera's mandibles clicked in what Elena recognized as a gesture of deep sorrow. 3 cycles ago, we encountered an enemy unlike any we had faced before. They call themselves the Void Hunters, and they are older than most civilizations in this galaxy. They consume worlds not for resources or territory, but for the simple pleasure of ending life. The general gestured to the containers her companions carried. "The Void Hunters have declared war on our species. They hunt our young, seeking to eliminate future generations. We have fought them across 17 systems and lost every battle. Our greatest warriors, our most advanced weapons, our strategic brilliance, none of it matters against them." Elena's mind raced. Why come to humans? We're not warriors. We're explorers, scientists, builders. "That is precisely why we come to you," Vexthera replied. "The Void Hunters understand warfare. They understand conquest. They understand destruction. But they do not understand compassion. They do not understand sacrifice for others. They do not understand the human concept of protecting those who cannot protect themselves." One of the Zephyrian warriors stepped forward and opened his container. Inside, Elena saw something that took her breath away. A small crystalline egg pulsed with soft blue light. It was beautiful, delicate, and completely vulnerable. "These are our offspring," Vexthera explained. "They are the future of our species. The Void Hunters can track them through our technology, through our biological signatures, through our warrior instincts. But humans are different. Your species has something we do not." "What's that?" Elena asked softly. "The ability to care for life that is not your own. The desire to protect the innocent without expecting reward. The Void Hunters cannot comprehend such behavior, which makes you invisible to their hunting protocols." Elena reached out tentatively toward the egg, stopping just short of touching it. "You want us to raise them. We want you to keep them safe until they can mature enough to defend themselves. It is not an easy task. Our young are challenging. They possess instincts we have bred for warfare, but in their early stages, they are as fragile as flower petals." Marcus stepped forward, his military training overriding his amazement. "How do we know you're telling the truth? How do we know this isn't some elaborate invasion plan?" Vexthera removed something from her belt, a ceremonial dagger that Elena recognized as a Zephyrian commander's honor blade. The general placed it on the ground and knelt beside it, a gesture of ultimate submission in their culture. "Because I offer you my life as surety. In Zephyrian law, if I have deceived you, you may claim my honor and my existence. No commander in our history has ever made such an offer to another species." The landing bay fell silent except for the hum of life support systems. Elena looked at the eggs, then at the kneeling general, then at Marcus, and the other humans who had gathered to witness this impossible moment. "How many?" she asked quietly. 12 offspring, the last of our bloodlines. If they die, our species dies with them." Elena made her decision. "We'll do it." Marcus grabbed her arm. "Elena, you can't make this choice for the entire colony." She turned to face him, and he saw something in her eyes he had never seen before, the absolute certainty of moral conviction. "Yes, I can, because it's the right thing to do." The next several hours were a whirlwind of activity. The Zephyrian eggs were carefully transported to specially prepared chambers in the colony's biological research facility. Elena worked with Vexthera to understand the basic requirements for incubation, specific temperature ranges, atmospheric compositions, and energy frequencies that would ensure proper development. As the general prepared to leave, she turned to Elena one final time. "Dr. Rodriguez, I must warn you. The Void Hunters will eventually find this place. When they do, they will show no mercy to any who stand between them and our young. Elena nodded grimly. Then we'll have to make sure we're ready for them. Vexthera studied the human scientist for a long moment. I begin to understand why the galaxy fears you humans almost as much as they fear us. You possess something far more dangerous than weapons or warrior's strength. What's that? The willingness to stand against impossible odds for the sake of others. It is a power that reshapes the universe itself. As the Crimson Fleet departed, Elena stood in the laboratory watching the 12 eggs pulse with life. Each one represented not just an individual being, but the hopes and dreams of an entire species. The responsibility was overwhelming, but she felt no regret. What she didn't know was that hidden sensors throughout the galaxy had detected the Zephyrian fleet's visit to Epsilon 7. Deep in the void between stars, ancient minds that had witnessed the birth and death of civilizations turned their attention toward the small human colony. The Void Hunters had found their prey. When monsters become guardians, 3 weeks had passed since the Zephyrian eggs arrived at Epsilon 7, and life in the colony had taken on a surreal quality. Elena spent most of her time in the incubation chambers, monitoring the developing offspring and learning more about Zephyrian biology than any human in history. The eggs had begun to show signs of imminent hatching, their crystalline shells developing hairline fractures that pulsed with increasingly bright bioluminescence. Marcus had turned the peaceful research colony into something resembling a fortress. Every available person had been trained in basic combat protocols, weapon systems had been installed at strategic points, and emergency evacuation procedures had been drilled until they became second nature. Still, he knew their preparations were woefully inadequate against the threat they faced. The first Zephyrian to hatch was the smallest of the 12 eggs. Elena was conducting her evening rounds when she noticed the shell beginning to crack more rapidly than the monitoring systems had predicted. She called for the xenobiology team and watched in amazement as a tiny serpentine creature emerged from the crystalline prison. The hatchling was nothing like what Elena had expected. Rather than the fearsome warrior appearance of adult Zephyrians, it resembled something between a dragon and a butterfly. Its skin was translucent, showing the delicate internal structures beneath, and its eyes held an intelligence that seemed ancient despite its newborn state. "Hello, little one," Elena whispered, extending her hand slowly. The creature regarded her for a moment, then moved forward and gently touched her finger with what would eventually develop into claws. The contact sent a mild electrical sensation through Elena's hand, and suddenly she could sense the creature's emotions: curiosity, wonder, and a deep sense of safety. Telepathic bonding. She breathed, realizing she was experiencing something no human had ever documented. "You can sense my intentions." Over the next few days, 11 more hatchlings emerged. Each one was unique in coloration and size, but all shared the same remarkable ability to connect with their human caretakers on an emotional level. The colonists found themselves forming unexpected bonds with creatures that were destined to become the galaxy's most feared warriors. Elena was documenting behavioral patterns when Marcus burst into the laboratory, his face grim with purpose. "They're coming," he said simply. Long-range sensors picked up the signatures an hour ago. 17 ships, moving in formation. The configuration matches General Vexthera's description of Void Hunter vessels. Elena felt her heart sink. The hatchlings were barely 3 weeks old, still completely dependent on their caretakers for everything. They couldn't be moved, couldn't be hidden, and certainly couldn't defend themselves. "How long do we have?" she asked. 6 hours, maybe 7 if we're lucky." Elena looked at the 12 young Zephyrians, each one representing not just their own species' future, but now symbolizing everything humanity stood for. "Then we make our stand here." The next few hours transformed Epsilon 7 into something unprecedented in galactic history, a human colony preparing to fight alongside Zephyrian offspring against an enemy that had never been defeated. The colonists worked with desperate efficiency, setting up defensive positions and evacuation routes, while Alina and her team prepared the hatchlings for emergency relocation if necessary. What none of them expected was the early return of General Vexthera. The Zephyrian commander's ship arrived just as the first Void Hunter vessels appeared at the edge of the system. She landed with a small strike force of elite warriors, their crimson armor gleaming under the colony's artificial lights. "Dr. Rodriguez," Vexthera said as she entered the research facility, "I could not leave our young to face this threat alone. My warriors, and I stand with you." Alina felt tears she didn't know she was holding back. "General, your ship will be detected. You've compromised your own safety." "Perhaps, but honor demands that we fight beside those who have shown such courage on our behalf. Besides," she added with what might have been a smile, "I am curious to see how humans wage war." The Void Hunters arrived like a plague of mechanical locusts. Their ships were things of nightmare. Organic technology merged with artificial intelligence, creating vessels that seemed to hunger for destruction. As they entered orbit around Epsilon 7, they broadcast a message in a language older than recorded history, translated by the colony's computers into chilling simplicity. "Surrender the Zephyrian offspring. Comply, and your deaths will be swift." Alina activated the colony's communication system and responded with words that would be remembered across the galaxy. "This is Dr. Alina Rodriguez of Epsilon 7. The beings under our protection are innocent children, and we will not abandon them. If you want them, you'll have to go through us." The first wave of Void Hunter dropships hit the colony's outer perimeter 20 minutes later. The creatures that emerged were living weapons, biomechanical horrors that combined the worst aspects of machine and flesh. They moved with perfect coordination, their tactics designed to maximize terror and minimize resistance. But they had never faced humans fighting to protect children. Marcus led the colony's defenders with tactical brilliance that surprised even the Zephyrian warriors. Using the terrain and their knowledge of the colony's infrastructure, the humans created killing fields and choke points that turned the Void Hunters' coordination against them. When conventional weapons proved insufficient, the colonists improvised with mining equipment, agricultural tools, and anything else that could be weaponized. Alina remained in the research facility with the hatchlings, but she wasn't passive. Using her knowledge of Zephyrian biology, she discovered that the young ones could emit focused electromagnetic pulses when threatened. Working with the colony's engineers, she created a network of amplifiers that turned the research facility into a fortress of biological warfare. The battle raged for hours, with neither side able to gain a decisive advantage. The Void Hunters had superior numbers and technology, but the combined human and Zephyrian forces fought with a desperation born of protecting innocent life. Gradually, however, the defenders were pushed back toward the research facility. It was then that something remarkable happened. As Void Hunter forces breached the facility's outer defenses, the 12 hatchlings began to glow with increasing intensity. Alina watched in amazement as the young Zephyrians, responding to the emotional distress of their human protectors, began to resonate with each other in perfect harmony. The resulting electromagnetic pulse destroyed every piece of Void Hunter technology within a 2-kilometer radius. In the sudden silence that followed, Alina realized they had discovered something the Void Hunters had never encountered: the power of symbiotic cooperation between species. The hatchlings weren't just using their abilities, they were amplifying them through their connection with human emotions and creativity. Vexthera, bloodied but unbowed, appeared at Alina's side. "Incredible," she said quietly. "Our young have learned something we never taught them." "What's that?" Alina asked. "That strength shared is strength multiplied." The battle wasn't over, but the tide had turned. Using the hatchlings' abilities in coordination with human ingenuity and Zephyrian warrior tactics, the defenders of Epsilon 7 systematically dismantled the Void Hunter invasion force. For the first time in galactic history, the ancient destroyers were not just defeated, they were utterly routed. As the last Void Hunter ship fled the system, Alina stood in the ruins of her laboratory, watching the 12 hatchlings sleep peacefully in their temporary shelters. General Vexthera approached, her armor bearing new scars but her posture proud. Dr. Rodriguez, what happened here today will change the galaxy forever. My people have learned that there is strength in vulnerability, power in compassion, and victory in cooperation. Elena smiled tiredly. And we've learned that sometimes the most dangerous species in the galaxy becomes family when you're willing to trust each other. In the weeks that followed, the story of Epsilon 7 spread throughout civilized space. The human colony that had sheltered Zephyrian young became known as the birthplace of the first true interspecies alliance. The 12 hatchlings, when they eventually matured, became ambassadors between their species and humanity, their childhood experiences creating an unbreakable bond. General Vexthera established a permanent Zephyrian presence at Epsilon 7, not as conquerors, but as partners in an experiment that proved cooperation could overcome any threat. The Void Hunters, faced with an enemy they couldn't understand or defeat, retreated to the dark spaces between galaxies. Their reign of terror ended by the simple human belief that all children deserve protection. Elena Rodriguez became known throughout the galaxy as the Guardian, the human who proved that sometimes the greatest victory comes not from defeating your enemies, but from showing them there's a better way to live. And in the research facility on Epsilon 7, 12 young Zephyrians grew to adulthood surrounded by humans who had chosen to love them before they ever met them, creating a future where the most dangerous species in the galaxy trusted humans, not with their weapons or their territories, but with their hearts.